In today's video, we're going to be breaking down Omarion Hampton of the North Carolina Tar Heels. What does he bring to the table? Where do we think he might go in the NFL draft? And what might we be able to project for him in fantasy? Watch till the end of this video and you'll have a good idea. As far as his size, Hampton on PFF is listed as 6'1", 220. I've seen 6 foot and 5'11" a couple places. I tend to think about 6 foot is probably accurate, and the 220 pounds is consensus, and it looks like on film that's probably pretty accurate. He's a true junior. As far as his age, he's 21 years and 8 months old right now, so he's going to be 22 for the majority of the NFL season. But with running backs, we really don't expect much more than 4 to 6 years at the max for most of these guys, and so age isn't going to be any issue for him. As far as his production goes, as a true freshman in 2022, he had 105 snaps, 89 rush attempts, 403 rushing yards on 4.5 per pop, 7 touchdowns, and 2 fumbles. And through the air, on 5 targets, he had 5 receptions for 36 yards and no touchdowns. And so, as a true freshman, he really wasn't receiving the bulk of the carries, but that's pretty good production. But what we'd like to see is an increase in production. And so, this next season, on 305 snaps, he became the focal point of the run game. He had 254 rush attempts, 1,500 yards, 5.9 per carry, 15 rushing touchdowns. Did have 3 fumbles, but that's not a ridiculous amount. We've seen plenty of these prospects with a decent amount of fumbles. But he took a big step up in the receiving game in terms of volume specifically. On 32 targets, he had 29 receptions, 222 receiving yards, and 1 receiving touchdown. And his PFF receiving grade went from 56.2 up to 70.7. And so that is the increase in production that we'd like to see from the true freshman to the sophomore season. Then when you look at his true junior season, he had 309 snaps, so barely more than his sophomore season, 1,660 rushing yards on 281 attempts, both up from the previous season, 5.9 per carry for 2 consecutive seasons, which is solid, not insane, but pretty good, and 15 touchdowns once again, but he only had 1 fumble this season. And so we do like to see that, he's only had 6 total fumbles on over 500 rushing attempts. That's not too bad. And as far as his receiving game, he did step it up with his production once again. Instead of 32 targets, he had 43. Instead of 29 receptions, he had 38. Instead of 222 receiving yards, he had 373. And he stepped up his yards per reception from 7.7 to 9.8 and went from 1 receiving touchdown to 2. His PFF receiving grade did dip from 70.7 down to 66.1. And so, all in all, these are really good statistics. We like to see the incremental growth, and this is going to give him a pretty good score on his analytics. Further looking into some more advanced stats, among draft-eligible FBS running backs with 100-plus rushing attempts, that was a sample size of 161 total backs, Hampton received 281 attempts this season, solid workhorse material there. His yards per attempt of 5.9 was tied for 12th in the sample size, so very, very good. But more importantly, look at his yak per attempt, his yards after contact per attempt. His 4.35 were 6th. This guy is an absolute bruiser. When you take a look at his breakaway run percentage, his 43.9% was 17th. We like that. His PFF rushing grade of 90.5 was tied for 7th. We like that. His PFF receiving grade of 66.1 was 21st. I would generally agree that he's a serviceable receiving back, but he isn't. Nobody's going to mistake him for Christian McCaffrey or Alvin Kamara or anything. Looking at his yards per out run, though, his 1.38 were 7th. And so he's quite effective after the catch, but he's just not the amazing route runner by any stretch of the imagination. When you take a look at his elusiveness rating, his 125.4 score was 8th among this class. His missed tackles forced of 72 were 5th. His rushing yards per game of 138.3 was awesome on 23.4 average rush attempts per game. He had 31.1 receiving yards per game on 3.2 receptions per game and 17 total touchdowns. And so it's not the Heisman level production that we saw from Ashton Genty, but this is really, really good production. As far as his grades go, remember that Omarion Hampton is a true junior out of North Carolina. I'd say he's about 6 feet tall, 220 pounds, which would give him a BMI of 29.8, which is slightly below the 30.0 threshold to be a workhorse back, but that is so close that I don't think anybody should be worried. And more so than specifically hitting that number, you want your total weight to be at a certain point. But once again, BMI preferably 30.0, but so close I don't think it matters. My comp for him is a Josh Jacobs clone. Everything I see in him reminds me of Josh Jacobs. Very physical, tackle-breaking machine, takes what he's given, bursts through the hole quickly. isn't really going to be the make you miss wiggly type of running back and is a fine but not incredible receiving back. Think Josh Jacobs here. My official grade for him is an 81.5 out of 100, which for running backs is a great score. Your elite scores are going to be 90 plus. I didn't grade Bijan or Gibbs, but I think they probably would have been in that elite tier. But regardless, a very good running back prospect. Taking a look at his contact balance, physicality, vision, ball security, and run IQ. His contact balance, I give him a full 5 out of 5. He breaks tackles quite well, stays upright, it doesn't even seem to phase him the majority of the time, and he's really good along the goal line, staying upright. His physicality, 5 out of 5. He seeks contact, trucks through people. He has a decent stiff arm, and yeah, his ability to bounce off of people cannot be overstated. In terms of his vision, I give him a 5 out of 5. He almost always picks the correct hole, but if you look at his run IQ being a 4 out of 5, with a lot of prospects, they might get criticized for bouncing it outside too often. I think sometimes he doesn't bounce it outside enough. If that might sound weird, but that's just my opinion. I do think sometimes that he doesn't possess this incredible agility to reach the edge and bend upwards like someone like Jahmyr Gibbs might be able to, or Bijan. But I do think that sometimes he could benefit from bouncing it outside more. In terms of his ball security, he only had 6 fumbles throughout his collegiate career, so a near perfect score there. If he had less than 5, I'd give you a perfect score. But nonetheless, no worries at all with ball security, and he received quite a bit of volume and only had 1 fumble this season. As far as his speed, I give him a 6 out of 10, and his acceleration an 8 out of 10. So he's a very quick accelerator to his top speed through the hole, and once he gets to the second level, he's already generally at his top speed. His top speed, though, just isn't that great. I think he's going to get chunk gains, kind of like Najee Harris, where he's probably not going to get any 70-yard rushing touchdowns, but 30 to 40 yarders are going to be pretty consistent with him, especially with his physicality. As far as his deceleration goes, I give him a 3 out of 5. He's not really going to hit you with too many hezzy moves and be able to stop abruptly to make people miss, but once again, he's more of a power back, so that's not going to be generally part of his game. As far as his agility and change of direction, so in the open field, he does have a little bit of wiggle, but it's more so in the ability to change lanes to maximize the amount of yardage that he can gain. It's not so much the make you miss in a phone booth type of agility and change of direction. And so that's not really the best part of his game. But in terms of being a pass catcher, I give him a 5 out of 5. He hardly drops the ball ever. He's relatively consistent there. His route running, he really just received dump offs, screens. He wasn't really running routes. He didn't put him out in the slot. So I don't think his receiving ability is going to be tremendous at the next level, but I do think he's going to be a guy that's good enough to where I think he has a really good shot at being a 3-down back. As far as his run after catch goes, I gave him a 4 out of 5. He actually had the 7th most yak per reception among FBS running backs that are draft eligible in 2025. And so he does turn into the running back that you see get the rock when he becomes a pass catcher. It's just that he's not, once again, going to slip too many tackles in terms of juking people out of their shoes, but he is going to break tackles through physicality. So no worries there in terms of his yak. As far as his pass protection goes, I gave him a 3.5 out of 5. He's very willing. His hand placement can be a little bit inconsistent, and sometimes he puts his head down when you need to keep it upright during pass pro. And so I definitely think with good coaching, that can be improved. And I don't think in the end, it's really going to be an issue for him. I definitely think he's going to be big enough to handle pass protection. As far as his dog factor, straight 10 out of 10. He seeks contact. He breaks tackles. His contact balance is tremendous. And like I said, think Josh Jacobs with this guy. And so as far as his analytics go, I gave him a 5 out of 5. We liked that as a true freshman, he was able to score a couple touchdowns and get over 400 rushing yards, but then we saw a substantial increase in production from his freshman season to his sophomore season, along with the pass catching. He was an afterthought. He only had 5 targets and 5 receptions as a true freshman, stepped that to over 20 as a sophomore. And then we saw a further progression in his receiving usage from his sophomore to junior season. And then his production on the ground, as far as from his sophomore season to junior season, was relatively the same, but he did keep his efficiency the same. And so he's going to get a 5 out of 5 there. Now, in terms of his projected draft capital, I give him a 4.5 out of 5. I do think he's going to be a late first-round pick, but there is the potential for him to slip into the second round, depending on his combine. I don't think he's going to test that well in terms of his 40-yard dash time, but I think most of these other metrics, especially the burst score, I think is going to be quite good for him in his terms of his vertical and broad jump. Now, as far as the worries, he might not be the best receiving option on his team, which for fantasy purposes could potentially limit his floor, but he's plenty good, and I think he's going to improve. He's a good run after catch guy. He's very consistent with his hands. It's just the route running isn't tremendous. And so once again, if you happen to have somebody like Austin Eckler on your team, for instance, you might not be the receiving back, but he's good enough to get it done. And then, like I said, he needs to keep his head up in pass protection and be consistent with his hand placement. And so, like I said, I do think he's going to end up being a late first round pick. And so I took a look at hit rates from any first round running back from 2020 to 2024, which there were none in 2022 or 2024. Looking at 2020, CEH was picked by the Chiefs with a 32nd overall pick. In 4 seasons, he had no running back 1 seasons and only 1 running back 2 season. And so that gives him a 0% hit rate in terms of RB1 seasons and a 25% hit rate in terms of RB2 seasons. Now, the difference with CEH to somebody like Hampton is nobody expected CEH to be a first round pick. Mahomes, for some reason, wanted him. I personally would have had him in the 3rd to 4th round in terms of his actual talent. But he was viewed as a pretty good receiving back, and I think that's what Mahomes saw in him. Nonetheless, it did not work out. But like I said, he wasn't that highly touted as a prospect. So I think he was definitely a reach. And I think most people thought that at the time, even though they were obviously in love with the landing spot. In terms of 2021, we had Najee Harris and Travis Etienne. Najee Harris was selected 24th overall. I do think that, and Etienne was selected 25th. I think that's right around the range we can expect Hampton to be selected. As far as Harris is concerned, in his first 3 seasons, he had an RB1 season and an RB2 season. And so that's a 33.3% hit rate on RB1 seasons and a 66.67% hit rate on RB2 seasons. If Hampton gives you that, I think you'd be pretty happy. And for Etienne, he did miss his rookie season with that Linz-Frank injury, but in 2 seasons afterward through 2023, he had an RB1 season and an RB2 season. And so that was a 50% hit rate of RB1 and RB2 seasons. Once again, if Hampton gives you that, you'd be pretty happy. You might hope for more, obviously, but I don't think we should be too disappointed if that ends up happening. And as far as Bijan and Gibbs are concerned, they were picked 8th and 12th overall. I think they were much better prospects than Hampton is, and so I think the draft capital is going to reflect that here. But as far as Bijan and Gibbs are concerned, in their first 2 seasons, they've both been RB1s. And as far as Gibbs, in a full PPR setting, he was the RB1 because Saquon ended up sitting out week 18. And so I think that we can probably project closer to what we saw from Najee Harris and Travis Etienne, unless he lands in a really good offense environment conducive to a lot of success in terms of touchdown scoring and heavy volume on the ground. And as far as where Hampton would rank compared to the 2024 class and Ashton Genty, I do think that him and Genty are in the same tier, but I think Genty's upside is substantially higher because I think he's a much better receiving back. Once again, I compared Genty to Alvin Kamara with a little bit less receiving prowess, mostly in terms of his route running ability. Like I said, I don't think you're putting Genty in the slot like you could Alvin Kamara or CMC. But as far as Hampton, once again, I think that he's comparable to Josh Jacobs. And so Alvin Kamara versus Jacobs, you'll be pretty happy with either one of them. But I think we all know that Kamara type of players have more upside due to their receiving capabilities. But nonetheless, Hampton compared to anyone in this 2024 class, it's not even close in my opinion. Like I said, I viewed Trey Benson as the best prospect in the 24 class, and Hampton would have easily been the RB1 in his own tier if he was coming out in 2024. So yeah, I think that he's going to be a great prospect. I think he's going to get quite a bit of usage. I think he's going to be really good along the goal line, going to score us many, many touchdowns. I think he's going to be capable of being a 3-down back. Hopefully he is able to get the receiving work and improve himself a little bit in pass protection, but I don't think there's going to be any worries there. And I think he's going to be quite a durable running back. And I think later in the season, when teams are wanting to pound the rock to close out games, I think he is going to be one of the better running backs at that. But what do you think? Do you think I'm a little bit too high on him? Do you think I'm a little bit too low? Is there something that you think I missed that you would like to add context for in the comments? If so, please do. And I want to give a special shout out to my Patreon members. Thank you to Big Hunt, SP, Mage Jack, and Infamy MTG. Remember that if you would like to join, it's a monthly contribution, and you would be getting access to a private Discord server where I can answer real-life football questions in one chat or potentially fantasy football questions. I would be ranking your team, giving you advice based on your specific league settings, suggesting trades for you, suggesting buying points and selling points for anybody on your roster. And so if you would like that, feel free to become a member. And besides that, you would also get early access to videos. You'd be able to suggest videos that I will make only available to Patreon specifically for you upon request. You'll be getting access to private live streams where I'll be doing unlisted YouTube live streams so that only Patreon members can join. And yeah, if you would like to become a member, feel free to. Otherwise, enjoy the free YouTube content. Thanks.